everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to another Walking Dead video. So I wanted to talk about Andrew Lincoln and talk about a bit of an update regarding the new series that he is filming. And I also really wanted to talk about something with Rick Grimes actually in The Ones Who Live that I've seen a lot of complaints about. I haven't talked about it that much because honestly, when I first heard the complaints, I didn't really agree with it. But you know, after some time, I can kind of see it now. I do kind of get what people are saying about not getting certain Rick Grimes moments in The Ones Who Live and why it just sort of feels very underwhelming with sort of what we did get with Rick Grimes. So I want to focus on that later on in the video. First, sort of get into the update here with Andrew Lincoln. So before going further, make sure to be a subscriber if you do want to get all my Walking Dead content like this. We're about 44 days away until The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon premieres. I actually really want to do a video sort of talking about Dead City Season 2 because there was an article written by CBR actually that was actually kind of exciting that really set up Season 2 really well. And yeah, just reading it and reading, you know, just some of where the story is going to go and whatnot for Season 2, it just kind of made me excited to watch Season 2 because I do think Dead City is one of those shows that people are overlooking a little bit because, you know, they've sort of admitted a little bit that Season 1 maybe wasn't the biggest season in terms of, you know, storylines and whatnot, but it seems like for Season 2, they're definitely going to be going in that direction because I think they saw how big of a story Daryl Dixon Season 1 was and The Ones Who Live, right? Like out of all three shows, those two shows had like these really big storylines with all this stuff going on, whereas Dead City was just Maggie and Negan going to New York City to find Herschel, which I think was great as like a first season, sort of introducing you to like this new world and whatnot. It was a very simple story, but I think a lot of the fans wanted a lot more overall, especially when you compare that season to the other shows, right? And it seems like they actually heard those criticisms here because Season 2 looks like it's going to be really expanding quite a bit and getting a lot bigger here. So yeah, I do want to talk about Dead City, but first let's get into the update here that I saw from @AndyLincolnNews on Twitter, and this is regarding the Cold Water series that he is actually filming, and the update is that apparently the Cold Water series is going to start filming in Ireland this fall. So I think right now they're filming in Scotland, so I'm guessing at some point they're going to move to Ireland to finish filming the series, I'm assuming, because it's only going to be 6 episodes long, and I don't think this is going to be something where you get a Season 2 or 3. Like they're saying it's like a limited series and like it's just going to be like this one story sort of thing, and you know the story seems really like interesting. I'm definitely going to be watching this and I will review this because first of all, I'm a big fan of Andrew Lincoln, but it's just that the premise of this seems really interesting overall. It seems like it's a thriller of sorts, and yeah, the reason why I find this really interesting is because I think it's kind of cool to see the projects that he has sort of lined up and like when he's going to be filming, because that sort of tells us when, you know, there could be a potential like Walking Dead next series update, right? Because I think a lot of people want, obviously, Rick Grimes to return. Everyone seems very open. It seems like it is going to happen at some point. It's just more of a matter of when. And I don't know when that's going to happen. Like, that's sort of the thing that we're all kind of waiting for right now. Is that's why, honestly, it was really unfortunate that Scott Gimple couldn't attend Comic-Con this year, because I think we actually would have gotten an update then. Like, even if it wasn't an update at all and it was just, yeah, you know, we hope this happens, this and that, like even just hearing that tells us a lot of like where things are at right now, because eventually this is going to happen. Like, you just got to think of it like this, like Rick and Daryl reuniting is going to be really, really massive, right? And obviously AMC wants to put that together. The actors all want to do that storyline. They all want to get back together at some point here. It is just more of a matter of when. And so following all the updates on like what they're filming right now and like where the story is going to be going and all these spinoffs and how it's going to set up this future storyline with Rick and Daryl's reunion, that's what's exciting about it. And so yeah, Andrew Lincoln obviously wrapping up filming this series very soon here. I don't know if it's very soon, but in the next couple of months for sure. I don't know when this show is going to premiere, probably next year, I'm assuming. I definitely will check it out then. And I'm just wondering what it's going to be like watching Andrew Lincoln in a new series, because I know I watched him in it was a Netflix show of some kind. I don't remember exactly what the show was called, but he was in like an episode of that show. And honestly, it was so cool to see him in that episode, but it was just so different because he's not playing Rick Grimes. And like, obviously, I want to see him like in other roles and all of that, but it was just definitely, I don't know if I was really a fan of the episode and like the story just kind of in general because of just the way the episode ended and all that. I was kind of like, I don't really like this story overall, but it's not saying I don't like Andrew Lincoln in other roles, because in Penguin Bloom, that movie he did a couple of years ago, that was actually really great. Like, that was a really great movie. I thought he was absolutely phenomenal in that, and I would just love to see him in more roles like that, especially just like bigger roles where there's more like, you know, suspense to everything. Like, there's something about, I guess, Andrew Lincoln in general in terms of like some of the roles that he takes on where when it is more in like the horror genre, or it's more like thriller focused anyways, where there's more like dramatic scenes and all of that, he really excels in those scenes. And people, I think, obviously you can see that, and that's why he is, like that's why he's Rick Grimes, right? And I think that's what people wanted more from The Ones Who Live specifically, was that I think people wanted to see Rick actually be more focused on an actual mission instead of finding his family, which I know is kind of insane to say. And I saw a lot of these complaints around the time that The Ones Who Live was actually airing. Like, that's when I first saw a lot of these complaints, was like, I want to see Rick doing more of this and that. And I was like, well, this is happening here. Like, we'll still wait and see. There's a couple of episodes still to go. And I think after the finale, I was more focused on that I kind of overlooked a lot of what people were complaining about, just with Rick in general. But people want more cool Rick Grimes scenes where it's Rick just trying to survive, and there's like really cool like walkers out there, this and that. And if you think about it, we never really got Murder Jacket Rick. Like, Scott Gimple talked about that before The Ones Who Live aired, that we were going to see Murder Jacket Rick, and we never really got that version of the character, right? Like, in episode 1 of The Ones Who Live, there was sort of a moment there a little bit, but not really at all. Like, we just never saw that version of the character come back. And a lot of the focus for The Ones Who Live, I think, was, again, just telling the whole epic love story, right? And I think that was the one line that when I first heard that, it did concern me, because obviously for a lot of fans, that's going to be really amazing, because I think a lot of people really love that aspect to The Ones Who Live, right? Or The Walking Dead in general is just, not even just really that, but maybe you just like those kind of stories in general. But I think for me, I do prefer more of the survival stuff, more of the cool stuff, you know what I mean? And there was still a lot of that in The Ones Who Live. I really liked like episode 1, when Rick was sort of on his own and there was all that dramatic stuff. And then in episode 2, where Michonne was on her own trying to find Rick, and then there was a bunch of stuff going on. Like, honestly, when you look back at episodes 1 and 2, it's kind of shocking that we never really got a lot more there, especially with Michonne's group as well, because like we were all wondering for so long, like, what's that group about? Where is this story going? This and that. And really, in the end, that group is just completely non-existent now. Like, there's no connection to that group at all. It really did not matter. I thought it was teasing like this bigger world, and it really just led nowhere at all. So I think that when you look at the story after they reunited, I think that's where a lot of these complaints were coming from, was like, we're not getting this cool Rick Grimes scene, this and that. And Andrew Lincoln's comments on like where he wants Rick's story to go next is exciting, because obviously a lot of what he was saying was that he does want it to be more of him trying to survive, and there's like this incredible threat out there, and now the characters, because the characters right now are just so strong and can overcome so much, but now there's like this new threat out there. There's something, totally different that is really challenging for them to deal with. And I really want The Walking Dead, at least the next Rick Grimes story, to definitely focus on more of that, because that is something that I guess I have been saying too, is that The Ones Who Live, in terms of the story, everything felt easy, like Rick and Michonne just sort of accomplished everything that they wanted to do, right? Like, whenever they had this like certain thing that they had to do, and it kind of seemed a little scary to to do that mission, they just achieved it right away. And it was just like everything was way too easy for them. And so I can definitely see that being a big complaint overall. And there was actually a couple things that I saw from a lot of people that they were saying like, this makes no sense, like, why wouldn't Rick have mentioned like this or that? And like, one of them was Rick never asked about Daryl at all. Like, there was that one scene with Rick and Michonne where Rick and Michonne were talking about, just sort of what was going on and all that. It was in episode 4, and Rick just never asked about Daryl or like anyone specifically, like back home. Like, he just never asked about anybody. And I do look at that and I'm like, I don't understand why. Like, even some of the Carl stuff was really cool, and that really does show a lot too. Like, as soon as he mentioned Carl and some of the connections to Carl, like, fans really liked a lot of that. And I just think that's sort of the issue, I guess, with Scott Gimple being the showrunner of this show, because I think Scott Gimple's really amazing at world building and sort of running everything. But when it comes to like writing an actual story for The Walking Dead, I think that's where things definitely get a lot more concerning. And there's always kind of been issues there. Like, whenever it happens online, there's always these complaints about like this and that. And I can definitely see it for sure. Like, again, Rick just never saying anything about Daryl. Like, why didn't he ask about Daryl? It's very simple just to sort of say, like, what about Daryl? Is he doing all right? Or just like anyone else in Alexandria, like any sort of mention to that, right? And I think, again, Scott Gimple being the showrunner of that show like Andrew Lincoln does trust him quite a bit. And I've noticed that with a lot of the stuff that they do in general, you know, like Andrew Lincoln just sort of trusts him in general. So I imagine the next story we get, Scott Gimple is going to be the showrunner, unless they do change that and maybe just make someone else a showrunner, but he sort of handles a lot more of the world building aspect again, just sort of like he does with the other spinoffs and whatnot. Because if you look at Dead City and Daryl Dixon, like those shows in terms of like the threat level and certain scenes and some of the action scenes and all that are just so much fun. They're so great. And a lot of the dialogue is really not cheesy at all. But if you look at The Ones Who Live, like it's the same complaints that were always there in like, you know, The Walking Dead season 7 and 8. And even before that, those complaints were there. But, you know, definitely those seasons, it got pretty bad where characters just weren't really like real characters. You know, like they started to focus more on like the philosophical meaning of all of this, right? And they just became like, again, not real people. Like you end up getting lines like the brave man, you know, and that's a line that I'm not a fan of. I liked it in season 10, I think is when they first said the line, even though they should have just said dad or whatever. But in terms of like, if you're telling the story of like the brave man, I kind of like that aspect to it because I'm like, well, you know, it's a kid's story. You're just sort of telling the story of like the brave man that saved everybody and, you know, the bridge blew up and this and that. I'm okay with that. But if you just look at The Ones Who Live's ending scene and that line, the brave man, you know, like it's definitely a very hard line to sort of, I think, deliver. And it's not even just that. There was so much dialogue throughout the entire series that just wasn't really that great overall. Like I'm just thinking of some of the lines of like, you know, like we can do this or we can do anything kind of thing. Like it's just a lot of stuff that just seems very like not real. Like not a lot of real people would say that, you know, and I think that's the one thing with The Walking Dead. A lot of us like these characters because they feel like real people, right? And so when you get lines like that, it just feels like this whole like fantasy thing happening in The Walking Dead and it just doesn't feel real. And that's why like, you know, with Daryl Dixon and Dead City, like the dialogue isn't really like that there. And so we'll have to wait and see where this goes. I do imagine that like with the next series, whenever they do announce it, if Scott Gimple is going to be the showrunner of that show, that people are going to be concerned about that like right away. Like, oh, that means the dialogue is going to be like this and that. And that's why in terms of, you know, like the dialogue just said on the show, like don't ever blame the actors for any of that because like the actors are just like they have to say these lines, right? You just need better dialogue in general. You need better writers to write these certain moments. And I just think that, yeah, I mean, I guess I get the complaints with The Ones Who Live, you know, just overall Rick never felt like Rick. I think in certain moments he did, obviously, but there was just certain moments that were just like, yeah, again, I think it was just sort of the point of The Ones Who Live was it was an epic love story. And I think that that was definitely for some fans and for others, it just wasn't, right? But I think in the new series, based off of what Andrew Lincoln was saying anyways, it definitely is going to focus more on that other aspect, which again, not all fans might not like either. The fans who really like The Ones Who Live might not like that aspect of that story, right? So it's just going to be whatever it's going to be. But yeah, Andrew Lincoln filming his new series is going to be a lot of fun to sort of follow and see what's happening just in terms of, are we going to get any new Walking Dead updates and whatnot? I can't wait for this new series to premiere. I'll definitely watch it and review it here. So yeah, but hope you guys all enjoyed the video and I'll see you guys in the next one.